Hello, and welcome to Our Special Lives. I'm Laura McGrath, and today we're talking about communicating with minimally verbal and nonverbal children with our guest, Suzanne McKeever. Suzanne is a pediatric speech-language pathologist with nearly 40 years of experience working with children who have communication, oral motor, and feeding disorders. Suzanne was formerly an adjunct professor at Virginia Commonwealth University for 7 years. In addition to her current pediatric practice through Treehouse Pediatric Therapy, which she co-owns, Suzanne has conducted numerous workshops on the topics of communication and feeding disorders with professionals and parents for nearly 25 years, as well as co-authoring An Educator's Guide to Feeding Children with Disabilities. And before we get started, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to speak with you.
Thank you for having me. This is such an awesome opportunity. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad. We're going to learn so much from you today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between nonverbal children, minimally verbal children, and then you've got kind of like pre-verbal and verbal children. And I think there's some confusion out there about what those terms mean. So if you could kind of run us through those to start the talk, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. I think even within our profession, there's confusion out there. So I'm going to give you my take on this. Pre-verbal to me is almost a natural part of development. When children begin cooing and then they vocalize and then they babble and then they go through jargon and then it emerges into talking, into words, phrases, sentences, conversational speech.
So that's kind of along a typically developing path.
It's along a typically developing,
Okay.
So pre-verbal is anything before the word stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can include, inflection and, there's a lot of different things in there that children are using to communicate even before words, right? So, unfortunately, we have come up with either children are verbal or they're nonverbal, right? And I have to tell you, in my experience, in my 39 years of working with children, with neurological issues, there is a very important group in there that I call minimally verbal. All right. So they aren't going to sit there and carry on a conversation with you, but there may be children that can say yes, no, hi, stop, whatever. Using words, even a few words, really means you are not nonverbal. You are minimally verbal. And that's really where I'm going in my goals initially, is to get a child to have some words. Every word we have is powerful in independence.
Now, where do the children fit in who, let's say, use vocalizations or facial expressions to communicate, but haven't quite crossed that threshold where they're actually able to say no, let's say,
right?
But they can make noises and that kind of thing. And like I know my son, for example, falls in that category. So he will make noises that sound sort of like a negative, like like that
Right.
kind of thing, or that kind of thing. And so I really know a lot about what his needs and desires are by those vocalizations, even though they're not technically a word. So would you put that child in a nonverbal category or a minimally verbal category, or kind of on the bubble between the two?
So, right. And I'd have to really see him and work with him, because, that's the thing, we use and as words. I mean, that's yes and no, right? It's not a written word per se, right? It's not yes, it's not no, but there's distinct meaning to it. So usually when I can get a and I could get a few others, and I really call them. So what we call those can be in another little area called marking words.
Okay.
Where you use a consistent sound, or you're giving a consistent vocalization to mean a word.
Okay.
Right. So, yeah, see, there's all that gray area in there. There's
Yeah.
not just verbal and nonverbal.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum in there. And that's where I like to, come in and show parents and help that child develop along that spectrum to get even more of those. So, a yes and a no. So we want to get it consistent. We want to make sure people around understand that. And oftentimes when we do begin to acknowledge those and respond appropriately to those, we begin to get more. And
because the child is encouraged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about why children don't talk. And this is something that I think is very important to explain, because I think unfortunately there's kind of an assumption maybe in the general public, not necessarily if this is your child, but that not speaking means that there's not anything going on cognitively. And It's just such a shame that that is the assumption, because that's really not true. So let's talk about reasons why children are nonverbal or minimally verbal.
So first of all, the question why is one of the most powerful questions a parent can have. All right. If you're going to be in therapy or you're working with the medical field, you want to be able to learn to ask the question why. If a therapist says, I want you to do this, why? Right? Or I think your child is doing this, why? Right? We want to know the whys. So when I look at a child and I'm trying to figure out why they're not talking. And remember, I'm talking mostly about children with some neurological issues, chromosomal issues. So there's a whole variety of reasons why a child isn't talking. But for me and the population that I typically work in, it comes down to two primary reasons. One is the global area of muscle tone, right? Children with low muscle tone, or, that lack good stability in their trunk, in their shoulder girdle up in here, in order to have mobility for breathing, for turning our voice on, for moving our jaw, lips, and tongue to make speech sounds, we need to have a base of stability to work off so that we can gain mobility. All right. And if we don't have good stability proximally, it's harder to get mobility distally, which would be speech. So it's really important to have that. So muscle tone issues is really, can affect all of that. It's going to affect respiration, your muscles for respiration. It's going to affect your sensory system. So oftentimes children with decreased muscle tone will have decreased sensory awareness as well. So they may not know that they have lips. They may not know that they have a tongue. So that's a big piece of one of the things that I'm doing, is coming in and really wakening up that body and, the mouth, the lips, the jaw, the tongue, the cheeks, and letting them know, first of all, that they're there and what their function might be. The other thing is, again, that lack of respiratory support. A lot of children don't have that good ability to take in a good breath and vocalize on the exhalation. So that's one of the whys. Another very common reason is motor planning disorders, or it's called apraxia. So, and believe it or not, muscle tone issues is dysarthria, and now we're talking about apraxia. They're two medical terms, but they're all kind of fall into the same umbrella of motor planning or oral motor issues. So motor planning is when your brain knows what it wants to say, but getting that signal from your brain to your respiration, to turning on your voice, to moving your mouth a certain way, it just short circuits, right? It's difficult to get out. So, and sometimes we see that, well, the hallmark of that can be inconsistency of breathing, inconsistency of turning on your voice. Sometimes you'll hear something that we call a pop out word, and you'll hear a child say, go. And everyone in the room stops and looks. Hopefully there's more than one person in the room, because we look to each other to validate that we just heard that. And that's called a pop-out word, which everything kind of came together and that child was able to get out a word. So motor planning is really important. And I always explain this to parents, and this is very, very basic explanation, because it's much, much more complicated. But let's say you come up with a word that you want to say, cat. All right. And the first thing you have to do is come up with a word. You have to take in that breath, right? Because we talk on exhalation. So you have to be able to coordinate breathing. You have to turn on your, vocal cords, move the air through there, get the voicing, and then move your mouth. And all of that has to be sequenced together in order to come up with a word. So in
it's
the
actually
world,
very complicated.
much,
And
very,
we don't even think about how complicated it is from a motor standpoint. It's like, for example, with my son Finn, he has a basal ganglia injury. It's kind of the mailroom of his motor cortex. And so when he comes up with that word cat, he sends the signal to move the mouth, but the signal is garbled. And he's just kind of unable to have that motor ability to move his lips and tongue and breath in the coordinated way to make that word.
Very much so. Typically, most speech pathologists, and the training that we get is to work on that at a word level or at a consonant level, right? So we go right up here. We're not trained to go down and, we have to work on turning on your voice, taking in a deep breath, controlling your breath. That, a lot of times children with muscle tone issues can't do that. So I start there with the, controlling your breathing. Then I do controlling your breathing with turning on your voice, getting that easy onset of voice. Sometimes children do it too hard. They work too hard to get that breath out and turn on their voice, and it works against them, right? So you either get a sound, or you get, you can't get that, right? So that graded, control, or that mid-range of voicing can be very difficult. Then you turn on your voice with easy, voicing, and then you coordinate mouth movements. So when I'm doing my work, that's where I live. That's my world of working with all of that.
Yeah, I did notice, when Finn was doing some speech therapy, it always started with the vowels, just jumped right in with the oohs and the ahs. And it's very challenging for him. And he was able to do it sometimes, but it was like all the stars had to align for him to do it. He was working so hard to do it, but it's like there were too many things going on at once that, because of his motor coordination issues, were just extra challenging for him. So it's really interesting that you're saying this, not to start at the particular letter sounds, but to back way up.
Back way up. And then there's where, that's where the magic happens to me. That's where I say to a child, I see your mouth moving, because sometimes children will get that part of it. You'll see them go, and I'm like, I see your lips. I see your mouth moving. You can turn your voice on, right? So, all of that in there. So we kind of have to give them the feedback as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but all of those layers are so important way before we get to say what I'm saying, imitate what I'm saying, copy what I'm saying. I'm really big with using a multisensory approach, right? Remember, we talked about there are some children that just don't have the sensation, the same feeling that those with, typical neuromuscular systems do. So I have to teach them, for example, I have a Z vibe. I'm sure many of you know about a Z vibe. This is something with a little flat ear where I turn on that Z vibe and I let them feel their lips together while I'm making a sound, right? And I let them, and then they begin to put their lips together. Oh, I have lips. Oh, they go together. I can do that. And then I start with you can turn your voice on while you do that. There's all sorts of tools that I use.
Yeah.
They're very tactile. So it's not just do what I do. watch what I'm doing, listen to what I'm doing. If it was that easy, they'd be doing it. Right.
Now, what if a child has an oral aversion? So when you're trying to do this stimulation, it's actually like potentially somewhat unpleasant for them. Where do you start with that child?
Okay, so I would not go right to the mouth. And you know what? If I came into your house right now, Laura, and we've known each other for years, but I'm not going to go right up and touch you on the mouth, right? It's just not appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. This is our space, our personal space. And yet I see therapists sit down and go right for the mouth with a child, and it makes me cringe.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you think of what part of our body touches things all day long, typically it's going to be our hands, right?
Okay.
We're reaching and touching and grabbing, and, you know, it's okay to shake someone's hand and not touch them on the lips, right? So I begin again distally as I'm working up more proximally.
Okay.
So I begin far out on the hands, gradually working up the arm, on the cheeks, and then I can get permission. And I always ask permission of a child. You know, I'm going to touch your hands. I tell them, is that okay? And oftentimes I'll get a child giving me their hands, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, they never do that. Well, has anyone asked them to give me your hand? You know, there's so much beauty along the way, right? Other than just making sound of all of these things, you know, that get permission is so important. So that may take weeks, it may take months, but we will get there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's really helpful, because I think that nonverbal and many minimally verbal children oftentimes do have that oral aversion.
Absolutely.
And it is kind of confusing, because a lot of times the traditional therapist will just kind of get right in there, and, you know, the child gets a little scared, I think.
Sure. You know, when I'm using any type of tool, I include that child. I let them help me turn it on. I let them hold it. I let them put it on my face. It was a little easier before all the COVID stuff,
Yes.
but you know what I mean? So there's a lot of that, getting familiar with what it is that I'm going to be putting towards my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time letting them feel familiar with the materials that I'm going to be using until I know that they have given me permission to work in and around their mouth.
So one of the things that I love that you're talking about is really getting the child's permission and input before you move forward with this. So, you know, I think the underlying premise to that is that you are believing that that child is able to process what you're telling them, is able to, you know, follow the commands that they want to the best of their ability. So it sounds like you really need to believe in the child and believe in their capabilities in order to successfully work with them.
So I love that you said that. And it is at the core of my work. All right. You have to let the child know that you believe in them. You believe in that, you know, that they're capable, you know, you believe that they're competent, but you believe that they're trying to communicate with you. When children have, you know, neuromuscular issues or they have motor planning difficulties, they work so hard to get voicing, breathing coordinated, sound, oral movement. When they do that, and we're not paying attention or we're not acknowledging that, can you even begin to imagine the frustration and how, you know, I'm not going to try. I'm going to give up. I'm not even going to try anymore. So I read an article once and it really hit home. And it said, children with apraxia will determine if you are worth the effort that it takes to try and say a word, right? To try and talk. If you're worth that effort, if you believe in them, then they will try their hardest with you. And I have to tell you, it's what sets one therapist aside from another.
Yeah.
You really have to believe. And then it's up to me to encourage parents to believe. And it's usually through the things that they see happening. And the more you believe and the more the child knows you believe, the more you're going to see.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the hardest things I know as a parent is response time.
Yes.
So can we talk a little bit about response time and how critical that is? Because I need a refresher on this,
Okay.
even though
So
we've talked about this before many times.
It's okay. I teach best by examples. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Laura, who was your 6th grade science teacher?
Don't remember.
All right, Laura, come on, think about it. Come on, you can do it. Think about it. Go back. Who was it? Where'd you go to school? Who was your teacher? Who was your, was it a girl? Was it a man?
Goodwin. I think it was Mrs. Goodwin.
Right. And as I'm asking and probing, you're like, shh, let me think a minute, right?
Yes.
So I did that on purpose. First of all, the first thing you did, I want you to know, and you'll see this on the video, you broke eye contact with me.
Mm-hmm.
You looked up.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we do to pull information down. No kidding. I don't know if it's in the literature. It's really an observation that I've made over years of working with children.
Okay.
We stop, we look up to pull that information down. And that's a really big clue for parents to watch for.
Okay.
And it's so interesting because oftentimes when that happens, we as a society think you're not paying attention to me anymore. I've lost you. Right? So what do? We repeat it again. When that, in fact, I believe is part of the motor planning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So always watch. If a child breaks eye contact, looks away, I really feel something's coming. All right. So it's critical during that time that we remain silent, vigil, let them know we're there, but silent.
So don't go do the dishes. Don't go check your phone. Be really present with the child.
Don't keep talking, asking it again. So let's say you come up with an idea, you have to take a breath, you have to turn on your voice, you have to use your oral motor stuff. So think about that. Let's just say that's 4 or 5 steps. Every time you jump in there and ask again, it kicks them back to that first step. You're actually inhibiting them from following through with that motor plan to get something out, mm-hmm. right? So when I ask you, how was your day today, Laura?
Pretty good.
Okay, that took 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's kind of what we expect with children. Come on, I asked you something, give me a response. So I actually teach parents to wait as long as 25 seconds for a response.
Okay.
Right, but you let them know you're there. And, you can shake your head, you can do whatever, and you're smiling and you're giving them encouragement, but you are giving them all of that time to motor plan.
Yeah. So you're continuing to pay attention and remaining silent. I think it would be helpful, because I know it would be helpful for me to actually put like a stopwatch on and see how long 25 seconds is. Because it's probably longer than any of us realize.
Tremendously long.
Yeah.
So here's what I tell parents. You want to wait to where you're sitting there going, oh, I got to say something, right? I have to say something. Because the child will feel that too, and sometimes there's children that we're always talking, they don't get an opportunity to talk. Mm-hmm. So sometimes just by giving them that time, that wait time, they're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, you're waiting for me to say something or do something. And that's when something happens, because we usually aren't waiting for them. So sometimes when we feel a little bit of that anticipation, they can too. Now that can work one of 2 ways. It can either encourage a child to, vocalize, verbalize, make a sound, or they can feel too much pressure. If you see a child really putting their head down, really averting your gaze, not the looking up, but really looking away, too much pressure.
Okay.
Too much pressure. And so believe it or not, there are some children that when I work with initially and I ask them something, and first of all, I don't say, can you say, all right? I say, you can say. Very, very, very powerful.
Yes.
Can you say is like, I'm questioning you. I don't believe you. Prove it to me. Right?
Yeah.
Can you do this? Can you? but you can is empowering. And it says, I believe in you, right? So sometimes I'll say, you can say, and for some children, I look away because even my looking at you is putting pressure on you to feel the need to respond. And the more pressure that's on, the harder it is to pull something down. So remember that spontaneous speech is easier than imitated speech in children with motor planning.
Okay.
Right? Because of that pressure of the pull it down now. This is what I want. This is exactly what I want. Versus if they're excited or frustrated or whatever, sometimes you'll hear something in that moment because it just came out.
So what is a way to encourage spontaneous speech in a child? Like if I'm sitting down with my son and I want him to know that I believe in him, but that I don't need him to say anything in particular, or I don't need him to make any particular sounds, like what's something that I could do just kind of sitting around in the evening that would be encouraging him to communicate, but not putting pressure on him?
So the most important thing is find something that he really is engaged in, that he's really enjoying. And one of the things I do with children that are in, a chair, a movable chair, is I do this, ready, set, go. And I move the chair. I either spin it around or I push them away or whatever. Most children like that. They enjoy movement if you're not startling them, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to do it suddenly, but right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say it. And the thing about motor planning is I do things in threes, right? Because I say it. So I say, ready, set, go. And I move them. Ready, set, go. And I move them. Ready, set. Are you feeling like you want to say go?
Yes,
right? Go ahead. But right. So you're giving that opportunity in a playful way. There's no pressure. And then after a while, after you've waited a certain amount of time, and usually I'll get a movement, a body movement, which is like, come on, mom, come on, Suzanne, do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a response.
Mm-hmm.
That's their response of saying go. And then I work on, or I can say ready, set, right? Something, listen for something. So the beauty of three is you've already given them the answer. They know what the response is without saying, say this, right? Or you can you can say this. You've just done it. You've done it in your play. There's no pressure to do it, but they already know what it is you're going for. And so, I use 3 words and I did it 3 times. 3, magic. It's just really magic.
And so when a child does respond, whether it's a vocalization or like you said, maybe even a nonverbal cue, what is the best type of way that you can encourage them?
So, I always tell parents during that waiting time, first of all, you want to be quiet, right? And you want to sit there joyfully, right? Engaged. You want to observe. We all need to be better observers. What you're looking for is you can see that breath. Oh, they're getting part of that. You might see the mouth change with the oh, right? I see, and then afterwards, oh, I saw your mouth where you were saying, I saw you say, oh, you can turn your voice on next time, right? I saw your mouth move. And I tell children this. I let them know what's missing in that, but that I saw them. So you validate and you celebrate effort, right? But just in case a child pops out with go, then you really, really praise that correct. You said go. That was it. Yes, you said it. But I still do praise effort. I saw you take your breath, right? Now, you don't necessarily want to do it right in the moment because you might stop, right? You might stop the next effort, but give them a little bit of time. And if you can tell it's not going to happen, I saw you take your breath. I saw you. That's awesome that you're really trying, and I'm telling you, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
With the children that I work with. They try, there's all of those pieces there in different parts, but we're not acknowledging them.
Well, that's exactly right, because those are details that I think in a typical therapy practice, we're not really trained to pay attention to those things. We're trained to listen for the result.
That's the word,
the word, the sound,
yes, the word
but there's
approximation.
but there's all these things that back it up. So just to kind of summarize what you said, you're looking for a movement, a breath,
So
potentially
think of what it is. Thought,
yeah,
breath, turning on the voice. Some children go, and you're like, yes, I heard you turn on your voice. Now you can open your mouth. Oh, so breath, vocalization, mouth movement. So observe, observe, observe.
And even if they look up, like you pointed out in me, if they look up, you can say, I saw you trying to figure that
out.
Pull
it down. I saw you trying to get that word. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because they're like, wow, this is happening. Someone's paying attention. They're seeing this. And I always tell parents during those times, you want to listen, and then you want to listen louder. And I know that sounds silly, but you want to listen louder than the TV going on in the background. You want to listen louder than the children talking in the other room. You want to really listen, observe, and validate.
I love that. That is just really awesome. I mean, this is so different than, again, what you would normally get in a normal speech therapy practice. So right. I think this is really important.
And in all honesty, we're not taught this in school, right? We're not. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's really been a lot of through the years, all the different types of training that I've had. And really the best training that I've had, and I've had some from the top in the world, has been the children that I work with. Observing, listening, watching, and getting to know that child and what it is that they're doing and believing in them. And if I believe they're going to give me something, trust me, I'm going to see it if it's happening.
Can you repeat the term that you gave for consistent indicators that children use, even if it's not like a formal word per se? What was that? Like if they're saying their version of yes, but
so like an approximation?
Yes, an approximation.
Yes. So, or even there's another word called an idiosyncratic sound, which means it's specific to that child, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And certain children, like, your child's yes and no, and someone else may not.
Right.
So listen for those, listen for the consistency, right? Mm-hmm. Listen for the timing of it. Mm-hmm. Was it, when he needed something? Was it in a response to something? Was it when he enjoyed something? Mm-hmm. All of that is communication.
Yep.
Right. And those are, even at the vocalization level, there's many different functions of vocalizations.
Yeah.
And you'll watch when you start, oh, he just requested something. Oh, he just responded to a yes, no question. Oh, he just let me know he didn't like something. Oh, he just refused something. All of those are different types of communication. Very, very important, very powerful.
So you really have to focus on being a detective and really having a deep understanding that the vocalizations and other things that your child are doing have meaning behind them. You just need to put the dots together.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, believe it, watch for it. And I'm telling you, maybe in my career, I've worked with 2 children who really, one was having constant seizures all day long, and he just couldn't give things to us. And the other one was really more in a comatose state. But other than that, I'm telling you, we especially moms, we learn very early our children's communication, their different cries, their different vocalizations. If we look for those and we build from those, I'm telling you, it's going to move us forward along that continuum.
Yeah. Well, I love that.
Oh, and one more thing, I often hear parents say, they'll come in and they'll go, "Hi, this is my son, Bill," and Bill's nonverbal. Okay. So then you take him to the doctor. "Hi, this is my son, Bill," and Bill's nonverbal. Okay. Then the nurse practitioner comes in. "Hi, this is my son, Bill," and Bill's nonverbal. All day long, every day. What are we telling them?
They'll never speak.
You'll never speak. Right? So powerful. It gets me a little emotional.
Yeah.
That we stop doing that. This is my child, Bill, and he communicates through his voice, through his smiles, through his body language. And if you watch him and you interact with him, you'll see what I'm talking about. He's a good communicator. Validate that. That is huge, right? And it really is empowering.
Yeah.
And I believe it's empowering to parents. I believe it's empowering to children. And I really think we need to just stop labeling that and believing that your child is communicating in many different ways.
Yeah.
Vocalization, pitch changes, number of syllables. There's so many things we can look at that let us know, yes, you are really trying to get that word.
Mm-hmm. And being more patient, listening for the response.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
I love this. Suzanne, if people want to learn more about you, or people, I know that with COVID, everything's kind of opened up as far as being able to do video appointments. How can people either find out more about you or work with you?
So there's a couple of different ways. First off, I am prohibited because of regulations to work across state lines.
Okay.
And that is very frustrating to me. I would have to get licensed in every state. You have to be licensed in the state where a child lives. So first, know that.
Okay.
Within the state of Virginia, I can do certainly virtual. I do in-person visits, limited right now because of COVID, at Treehouse Pediatric Therapy in Midlothian, Virginia. And then I have my own private practice, which is kind of merged between those two, called We Communicate, because I do oral motor feeding too. So my email address is feedinglady13@yahoo.com. And I tell parents, you're welcome to reach out to me. If you have a question, please limit it to one question, because I get these long emails and I want to. Trust me, I want to answer every question. I really don't have the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I would prefer to do is either a Zoom call consultation, coming into Treehouse consultation, or phone call consultation, something where I can really take the time to ask the questions and get that information. So,
well, that's wonderful. And can you give us the Treehouse website?
Sure. It's www.treehousepedstherapy.com.
Got it. And I'll link to that below as well.
Yeah. That's great.
This has been so fantastic, because I think this is just such an under talked about area of communication. I think there's so much confusion. You have given us so many things to think about. I know that it's going to, just having this talk today is really going to re-energize my approach with Finn. And I hope this isn't the last time we talk to you on this channel, because I think you've given us so much good advice.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. I just believe every child deserves a voice, and we've got to figure out where that is. So thank you for letting me talk.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.